Great. Well, welcome everybody. It's so wonderful to see participants here today from around the province. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today and joining us. On behalf of Contact North and eChannel, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar under the Eye of AI. My name is Sarah Govero. I'm the director of eChannel at Contact North, and I'll be your host for this session. I'd like to begin with a provincial land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that Contact North's work and the work of our community partners takes place on traditional Indigenous territories across the province. We are grateful to be able to work and live on these lands. We express our gratitude to the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples who have cared for these territories since time immemorial and who continue to strengthen communities across Ontario. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. So we are using Zoom webinar today, so participants' microphones and cameras will remain off. The chat is open, but please remember to select everyone in the drop-down menu when posting. And if you have any questions, kindly use the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. We'll pause during the webinar to address questions. And you can also upvote any questions that resonate with you by clicking the thumbs up icon. Live captioning is available, and I'm just going to make sure that I have started it there. Okay. So for you to activate it on your screen, just simply click the closed caption icon at the bottom of the screen. After the webinar has concluded, a short survey will pop up on your screen. If you wouldn't mind taking 1 minute to provide your feedback on the session, that would be greatly appreciated. You will also receive a link to the recording via email through the Zoom system in about 24 hours. And I will also post the recording and all the slides on the eChannel portal. All right, that's it from me. On to our main event. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers, I should say. We have Carolina Cahoon, who's an EdTech consultant at Literacy Link South Central. With a background in education and rehabilitation, she is passionate about inclusion and accessibility. Carolina designs learning experiences that embrace diversity and is particularly interested in AI's potential to enhance learning through personalized adaptations within the universal design of learning framework. We also have Jeremy Marks joining us today, who is the project manager and EdTech researcher at Literacy Link South Central. With over 2 decades of teaching experience across Canada and the US, Jeremy specializes in essential skills education. His fascination with AI stems from a deep passion for education theory and cognitive philosophy, exploring how technology can transform the learning experience. And last and certainly not least, we have Chris Cahoon, who is the Senior Director of IT at Financial Technology, also known as FinTech. Chris possesses nearly 30 years of experience in the field of information technology. He supervised operations supporting both financial institutions and end-user consumers. Although not formally certified in privacy and security, Chris has significant responsibilities for ensuring compliance and stringent privacy and security regulations and policies. So thank you very much, Carolina, Jeremy, and Chris for joining us today. And I hand it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. So I have posted, and I can do it again, the agenda for today's webinar in the chat. I'm going to do it again here because I realize we've had people introducing themselves, which is great. So I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to see it. So bear with me a moment while I bring that up. You'll see it should pop up in the chat momentarily. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. So that's got a list of not only the panelists that you have been introduced to, but also the topics that we're going to be covering. So we have a pretty content-heavy agenda for today. And so I am going to just immediately turn it over to Chris for his presentation.
Thank you. Let me just pull it up. Let me know if you can see that.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, great. This will be fairly brief. We're going to talk a little bit about privacy as it relates to artificial intelligence. It should be noted that privacy, those standards will apply to other online activities as well. So considering things like social media, um, surveys and other potential platforms and services. As I said, the focus will really be on privacy, but I do mention security here. So what is the difference between the two? Privacy focuses on an individual's rights over their personal information, whereas security protects data from threats. So while distinct, these concepts work together. Strong security ensures privacy. Respecting privacy requires good security controls. So the key differences: privacy, as mentioned, is obviously the right to control your personal information. So that's controlled and protected by things like data protection laws, privacy policies, user consent forms, anonymity. In the case of security, that's again protecting that data. So things like firewalls, encryption, intrusion detection, and antivirus. Those are just a few examples. There's certainly many more. So what is the relationship between the two? Well, again, you can have security without having privacy, but you can't have privacy without security. If you've got private information, it needs to be protected. You can certainly have a system that allows for private information to be exposed if all the parties are in agreement, but you would still require security to protect it so that it's not modified by some outside party. So at the end of the day, it's about a balanced approach, a strong security with privacy respect to create optimal protection. So how can you safeguard your privacy? One of the most important things, this really comes down to behavior. When you're using artificial intelligence or other systems, most of the safeguarding of that information comes from the provider. They're going to implement the security that protects those systems. They will have policies in place. They need to meet regulations and legislation. So they'll have a large responsibility for that. But you as an individual need to protect your privacy as well. So understand how your data is collected, stored, and used. Read the privacy policies. They're never fun. I know a lot of us just tend to click that accept button, but it is worth reading. Be mindful, so avoid providing unnecessary sensitive personal or financial information. Consider what information you're sharing with artificial intelligence. Do you need to share it? Is there value in it? Do you get something back out of it? So really consider what it is that you're actually using within those artificial intelligence systems, and then consider what platform you're using and what privacy features it may offer. So it may have the ability to clear your conversation history. It may have the ability to use a private mode or incognito, where it automatically, when the session closes, all that information is forgotten. So take a look. Many products have different settings. We certainly can't go into them here because there's just a plethora of products out there and they all have different abilities. But take a look and see what that particular product that you're using has as a privacy feature. So how can we protect our privacy? What techniques can we use? So we can use pseudonyms, right? If we're putting in identifiable personal information, we can use an alternate or alias name for it. We can mask data using random characters. We can look at data swapping to move data attributes or break identification links. And we can use perturbation. So we can add noise to data to allow for still the use of statistical trending, but to obfuscate the real data. So for example, if we're dealing with a bunch of salary ranges and we want to create a document that's going to align within certain departments, how much is the average salary between say 40 and 50,000? How many people fit into that? Well, instead of putting in an individual's exact salary of say $52,001, you could put in $51,812, right? Just to at least change the data. So if somehow it ever leaks, it can't as easily be linked back to that individual. So how can you, or how can you protect yourself with Wi-Fi, right? So if you're obviously using artificial intelligence and you're having fun with a friend and you just want to ask it, create me a cute story about a cat who's afraid of a mouse, there isn't really a concern. You're not dealing with private information. But if you are in a location using Wi-Fi, consider using a VPN to protect that private information. It will hide your IP address. It will encrypt the data during transmission. One of the biggest problems with Wi-Fi is people eavesdropping on those connections, trying to capture and read data. If the data is encrypted, they get nothing but gibberish. And it prevents your ISP or internet service provider from potentially tracking certain activities. So you can also look at privacy-focused browsers. So you can consider options like Firefox, Brave, or Safari. They have a heavy focus on privacy, and you can consider extensions such as Privacy Badger that will help deal with tracking cookies and so forth to help reduce the risk of your identity being made aware. In the case of other products, because I know a lot of people probably use Edge and Chrome and so forth, right? I'm not saying those are bad products or that you should necessarily avoid those, but these ones have a much higher focus on privacy. And you may need to use those other products if you're within an organization. If you've got an Office 365 subscription, your company's paying for Enterprise Copilot, you're probably going to use it. But there's also other implementations that your organization can input and restrictions that they can make against those products to ensure that data or information isn't leaked. So one of the things that I think a lot of people forget is to protect the data in your images. There's many artificial intelligence tools to just create a random image. That's fine. But there's also ones that allow you to upload an existing image to manipulate it. So one of the things to be careful of is check for visible text, right? If you're dealing with privacy, you want to make sure, are there signs, screens, or papers that might reveal private information, right? Do I have something sitting on my desk? I've taken a picture of a new product I've just bought from Amazon. Do I have a document sitting next to it that has private information that I don't want to share? So consider what images you're taking, what you're uploading. Consider removing metadata. So GPS coordinates, timestamps, device information, a lot of that is tagged as information that you typically don't see, but it's there within an image. So there's options within the device, say the iPad, the Android phone, et cetera, to turn that off. And in the event that it doesn't have that capability or functionality, you can get third-party tools that you can install on your computer that would strip and remove that information. So consider that before uploading that information. You can blur or crop. So if you did have that document sitting on the desk, but for whatever reason you can't retake the picture, you can just crop it, meaning cut it out, or use other softwares to blur it. And the same with faces. If there's individuals in that picture that really may not want their pictures up on a platform, you can certainly use tools to obfuscate or anonymize those faces. So a few other additional best practices for AI interaction. So using anonymous accounts. Again, I mentioned if you're in a corporate system, you may not have that possibility, but if you're an end user, you're just accessing a large language model, you're putting in a prompt, that prompt may have some sort of information that you don't want linked back to you, then certainly you can use anonymous accounts. So rather than using your first name dot last name at Gmail, you can create an account specifically for use with those systems. Voice recording. So enable it only if it's required. Ensure that participants are advised if it's in use, and you may have the ability, depending on the product, to disable recordings if they're not required after the fact. So it can still use it to create, say, a outline of the meeting content, but then remove and delete that data after the fact. Again, that will be very specific to the particular product that you're using. And most important, stay informed. So keep up to date about evolving privacy standards and AI capabilities. So this was a very, very short presentation, but I did create a document that I've shared with Jeremy and Carolina that I believe they will be forwarding after this. It's a 14-page document, covers policies, practices, procedures, guidelines. It has more detail on these practices and behaviors that I've just discussed, so it goes into them in more depth. That's it for my presentation, Jeremy.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. And I will have an opportunity within the next few minutes to put the document that you've created into the chat for everybody to see it and download it because I've had an opportunity to take a look at it, and it's a terrific resource. And as I mentioned earlier, one of our goals today is to try to give people resources that they can use and use as a point of reference, because one of the things I certainly know from experience when you're introduced to new material is it's always great when you have some form of reference that you can pull out and take a look at as new challenges or new questions arise. So again, thank you very much, Chris. That was excellent.
You're welcome.
Okay. So the next presentation that we have is from Carolina, and this presentation is entitled Mastering the Job Hunt, AI-Driven Resume, How It Can Help Learners Build Competitive Resumes That Are AI Screener Savvy. And I'm really delighted that we have an opportunity to explore this as well, Because one of the things that you may have encountered in LBS is that when you're working with learners who are eager to enter the job market and be successful, if they're on the employment goal path, being able to create a competitive resume is very, very important. And there are certain hurdles that people can encounter now through the use of AI. So Carolina is here to address this topic. So Carolina, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. I wanted to add to the previous presentation that Chris and I have worked together thinking about the LBS environment. So a lot of that content is content that I personally thought, due to my former background in literacy and basic skills, that would be helpful for everyone. Because when we spoke about privacy, it was actually quite extensive. Like Chris was ready to give me like a 500 pages document. So we really focused on what I personally believe it was needed. So, and again, this is subject to ensure that we continue modifying this document. We will be continuously reviewing it, and because we want to make sure that it is helpful for the LBS community. And I just want to ensure that you can see my screen well. I've just shared my screen on the applicant tracking system.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so why we thought to bring this to your attention? One of the reasons that I'm expanding on this is because we briefly shared the applicant very brief. So I will be sharing more information about how AI impacts the applicant tracking system, which is very common software that has become increasingly prominent, actually, in companies seeking to streamline the hiring process, because these systems aim to improve efficiency, accuracy, all type of decision making by collecting, organizing, and analyzing all the job applications. There will be also, as you can see here, there will be also a Google Drive link, which takes you directly to templates that are actually ATS friendly. You don't need to use them, but it will give you a little bit of point of reference of where to get started. So here are some of its key features for the ATS and capabilities. So one of the things that the ATS capability has is the job posting management. It distributes job postings, openings across multiple boards and company career pages with so much ease. It's one of the reasons that it's used. Then it does resume parsing. So what it does is ATS scans resumes to extract all those important details, such as the skills, experience, and certifications. And then it does a candidate screening, which what it does, it filters applicants based on criteria. And this is where we need to pay attention on those keywords and qualifications which the machine makes to identify the best matches. And then communication tools. ATS allows recruiters to communicate directly with the candidates within the platform. It also does workflow management, because it keeps track of the candidates throughout the hiring journey, ensuring a seamless process. And then, of course, some of the important things with the analytics and reporting. The ATS provides critical insights like the time to hire and candidate source effectiveness, which helps recruiters make data-driven decisions. So you may be wondering, how does an ATS work? We spoke a little bit about that. The ATS parses resumes into these structured formats. It compares them against predefined keywords and phrases too. We will talk about phrases, not only about keywords. Evaluates the relevance to the job description, and it includes synonyms and variations to ensure that qualified candidates aren't overlooked. So it's sort of intelligence in some regards. It's just depending on on the ATS system. So I'll give you an example. Like, for example, if it says RN, it identifies it as registered nurse, and that would be recognized as the equivalent by many ATS systems. But suffice to say, I will be sharing with you why it's not a good idea to just put some of those abbreviations, because not all ATS systems are the same. So we will dive a little bit deeper into the keywords ATS may scan for. So these are some of the important keywords. So the keywords, very important to have on the resume, are skills. Examples include any interpersonal skills, for example, somebody has any coding proficiency, leadership qualities. Skills is a very good keyword in a resume. The next keyword that is important are certifications, such as PMP. Just ensure that you put into parentheses project management professional. Or, for example, if you say CISM, just put in parentheses certified information security manager, so that the resume goes through, because the machine sometimes cannot actually guess. The other keyword is education. Degrees like, for example, a BA in communications or a PhD in computer science, it will certainly read that. It understands what is a BD and a BA and a PhD. Former employers, I said some of the well-known ones like Microsoft, Walmart, or Canadian Tire. It actually looks for that. It also looks at your work history. Feels like marketing, sales, customer service, or software development. We need to make sure that those keywords are clearly aligned. And then action verbs. Action verbs are really important, especially depending on the job that individuals are looking for. So, for example, it's important to put for leadership roles words like, instead of supported, for example, put manage, implemented, analyze. Those are the keywords that stand out on an ATS. Now, I would like to explore some advanced ATS features that take recruitment to the next level. So these are very important. So for the advanced ATS features, the contextual skills assessments, or what we call quantifiable. What does it mean? Modern ATS evaluates not just keywords, but the context of your experience. So this is when I meant that it's not only the keywords, but we need to ensure that how much detail we provide. So I'll give you an example. Manage a team of 10 doctors in a high-pressure hospital, improving patient satisfaction by 20%. That is highly scored by an ATS simply than listing just management skills. So it's important to be mindful of that. And then the strategic keyword placement. Keywords in sections like work experience or skills are really more impactful than in less relevant areas, such as hobbies or summaries. So sometimes people tend to put some of these keywords in those other areas, but what the ATS is looking at and paying attention is at the work experience and skills. And then we have intelligent scoring and weighting. ATS assigns scores based on keyword matches and relevance. For example, if there is proficiency, that's a high word, right? In Python, and if that's part of the critical role, candidates with Python expertise receive higher score. And then with the advanced job match rate calculation, this advanced ATS provides a match rate indicating how closely a resume aligns with the job description. Typically, don't quote me on this, but based on what I learned, a score of 80% or higher ensures progression to the next stage. So now I have an activity for you. Before sharing tips for crafting an ATS-friendly resume, I would like to invite you to identify the elements in a resume that might prevent it from passing the ATS screening process. So I will share with you a mock resume. And Jeremy, do you have that copy? Are you able to share if we can?
Would you like me to share a copy of this in the chat?
Yes. Do you have that handy?
I have everything that you sent me in a folder, so let me go and take a look, and I should be able to put that in there for you.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a few minutes.
I've placed it in the chat so everybody can get it.
Sounds good. So the question is, I would like to invite you to identify what elements in a resume may prevent it from passing the ATS screening process. What do you see here? The font. Great. Yeah. It is very scattered and disorganized. Text boxes. Oh, that's a good one. That's a great observation. Two columns. Yes. The giant DM seems unnecessary. Yeah. And these, just to share this, you will find actually this exact template on a Microsoft. It's a Microsoft template when you look it up. So I did not create this from scratch. ERP implementation may not be recognized, the acronym, bold type. It's sideways. Yeah, the information is sideways. The acronyms used like ROI and ERP, correct? Oh, lack of contact information. Worked on a project, not a strong action word. Yes. Need more quantitative information. Missing outcomes. Perfect. Yeah. References don't show title or connection to potential hire. And this is something a hiring manager might see, not necessarily an ATS, but yeah, that's a good point. Anything else? You got most of them anyways. Yeah, I will show you some of the ATS elements that are not so friendly here, and many of them you mentioned. But there was so much I could add to the screen. So these are some examples. So what we can see here, for example, the headers and footers, right? The font, some of you mentioned the font. And you mentioned the acronyms. And you mentioned some of the passwords, the association with relevant skills, and not enough and not great action verbs. So I will walk you through these. So here are some tips for creating an ATS friendly, which again, you mentioned many of them. So use a standard format. So first off, start, as you could see, I went directly to grab a fancy template just like that from Microsoft. So start with a clean, easily readable resume template. And Word or Google Docs offers great ATS-friendly templates. So all you need to do is on the search, just ensure that you type ATS. Avoid fancy designs, such as graphics, images, tables, and multiple fonts, because these can confuse the ATS. Also use black bullet points. I don't know if you observe here. I actually did that on purpose. I think somebody mentioned the checkboxes too. Use black bullet points, and the reason for that is because non-standard bullets, like these little stars or diamonds, may not be parsed correctly by the machine. And I have seen that already in some resumes before. Ensure you add standard headings. Use clear titles like work experience, education, and skills to help the ATS categorize your information. Because in this case, if we look at it, sometimes people get creative. They put education journey or about me. So try putting headings like summary or an objective. Education is plenty. This title is fine, such as skills or experience. This is clearly defined by the ATS. One thing that we didn't, nobody mentioned is to be consistent with the dates. Format dates as January 2022 to December 2023 and keep placement consistent. So if we look at it, it says 2010 to 2014. So just ensure that you use the months and years format or the months followed by the year, and make sure that all these dates are consistent through the resume. So you can see that here there is no consistency at all. So that actually can seriously confuse the machine. Somebody mentioned using readable fonts. So ensure that you stick to simple ATS-friendly fonts. Arial, Calibri, Times New Roman, Verdana are readable fonts. We spoke about repeating keywords naturally and including measurable achievement or quantifiable achievements, right? So for example, achieved a 40% increase in customer service satisfaction in 6 months. It's a little bit small here, but that's what it says. That's a quantifiable term. So it's highly scored by the ATS system. The other tip is to ensure that you save your resume in a compatible format, generally a Word doc or PDF, if possible, that you do that so that it is readable. And to avoid headers and footers, putting important information on headers and footers, because ATS may not read these fields. And so many people tend to include sometimes like a personal web page there, or I don't know, they may include critical information so it's ensuring that you include all critical information in the main body. So again, the impact of the ATS right now is immense. For job seekers, understanding how ATS works and how to optimize resumes for it can really make a difference between landing an interview or being overlooked. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Carolina, we do have one comment or question in the chat about whether or not the commented resume that you have on screen right now could be provided as a resource to people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Even if when I'm presenting, if you would like to send that to me as a PDF document, I should be able to post that into the chat before the end of the webinar.
Sure. Is the mock resume resource with recommendations? Is that
Yeah,
the one?
the one that has
Yeah.
the comments with the text boxes right there with the text in purple.
Yeah,
That would be
absolutely.
great. Thank you.
Yes, and it's a clear visual for everybody to be aware, because these are some of the most common resume mistakes. Like, yeah, the column, the font are great, but even some of the content, and ensuring that the information is quantifiable and what to look at. Thank you, Jeremy.
My pleasure. There's also a question for you. Is there a resume development tool that you recommend?
In my, not necessarily a tool, but what I have done on the presentation, I haven't stopped sharing, I guess. You can still see the screen, right?
Yes, we
So
can.
if you see in the bottom and sharing, we will share this presentation. So there are a few resources here that you may find helpful as a point of reference. What I do though, I generally just start with a good template, such as I use Microsoft products. So I just do ATS and then I just follow their recommendations. So I don't have any specific tool, just the knowledge that from all these resources.
And there's another question that if a person discloses any sort of disability, will that impact the process of the resume being screened? I think that's a great question.
It's a machine. So I don't think machines really discriminates unless on the back end somebody may have put that, which I cannot see that. So not to my knowledge, nothing I have read on that specifically. It's not the way ATS works. Indeed, it actually focuses on skills, certifications, and quantifiable experience. I think those are some of the three main items, and just making sure that the most important information is on the main body of the document. Anything that is fancy beyond that, it is unlikely to be read, but it may be well received by the hiring manager, right? Whenever they print out the resume, they look at it. So I'm not saying that it's a bad idea, just ensuring that the resume goes through the machine. That's the main thing.
I think that's it's an interesting question too, because it's a segue to talking a bit about, how the AI itself is trained as well in terms of the types of keywords or tokens that it's looking for. So, which is something that I'll be able to touch on in a moment. There's another really good question in the chat now as well, which is that does it make a difference if the resume is 1 or 2 pages in length?
Not to my knowledge. But I know that most companies are actually been looking at shorter and shorter resumes, but I don't think it has a conflict with the machine.
There's also a question about would submitting a PDF version reduce the issue of putting information in the header and footer?
I'm not sure I have a response to that. I think when you're submitting a PDF, you're just safeguarding some of the information so that it's not on a Word document. I personally would never submit a Word document, but I'm not sure if it will reduce the issue of putting information in the header or footer. It shows up anyways. It's just the machine just doesn't read it, but the hiring manager will see it when they print it out. Do you have any comments on that, Jeremy?
I don't. It's a great. I think that's a great question because because I also wouldn't submit it in Word form. I would use it in PDF form. I guess my gut instinct on that, for what this is worth, is to just take the precautions regarding headers and footers that you've mentioned, right? And I think that's really what it comes down to, because when I create PDFs, of course, I go through the Word document process first. So I just sort of see PDFs as being a more secure version or an extension of the Word document. So that's my understanding at this moment in time. But this is one of those things where I'd be curious to investigate that further, actually, because it's not a question that I've considered previously.
Yes, and again, I don't think the ATS is looking at the branding specifically. I think that's something that the hiring manager would see. So even if it's a PDF, if they're interested in if it passes through, they will print that out and they will see it, or they will look at it in the screen. But yeah, that's a good question.
There's an additional comment too about how they usually use the header as a form of letterhead in documents, whether it's a resume, cover letter, or references for branding. I could definitely see that, right? Especially if you do have, letterhead, how that letterhead is going to be screened. I guess when I approach this issue, and again, I'm showing a bit of my bias here, is I'm thinking about resumes when I'm working with LBS learners, and often it's I'm not personally thinking about the letterhead aspect of it, but I think again that makes this a really valuable question for certain. So I appreciate all of these questions, and definitely one of the things I like about these webinars too is that when we get this kind of input, it always provides additional food for thought for us, because and I'll speak to this in a moment when I'm talking more specifically about AI and AI learning. I am constantly learning new things and constantly evolving my understanding, and that's one of the reasons why I find these types of webinars, as well as the AI Bytes newsletters, is so valuable, because we have the opportunity in groups to share our questions with one another as well as our learnings. So again, I'm personally very grateful for these kinds of questions.
Absolutely. And one of the things based on what I see in the chat, that yes, any contact information in a resume, do not put that on the header or footer, because the machine is not going to be able to read it. Just make sure you put that in the main body of the document.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the additional comment there too is that it doesn't, in a PDF, the header doesn't look like a header, right? Which is also a component here too. I was thinking about that.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. That doesn't look like a header. Yeah. Okay, I can see the point there. Yes. So the header here in the document, the only header is follow me, like www.linkedin.com, David Milano. So the machine will not be able to see that. The graphic that is here will be very difficult for the machine to even read, but that's not by any means, that's not the header. And then you're right. So the davidmilano.com, that would be a footer. So yeah, no, that's a great question. But yes, by all means, please put all the information inside the main content of the document. Don't put any critical information on headers and footers. Great question, actually.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Carolina. And as we move on, if people do have questions that come up about previous presentations, please do not hesitate to put those into the chat. We're happy to come back to questions, because I also can appreciate how you may be listening to a different presentation and something may click in your mind that you want to share. So, please, all questions are welcome. All right, so the next item on our agenda is one that I'm going to be addressing, which is an introduction to the language learning model with AI, and there will be an opportunity to connect this to the Poe chatbot that we have developed, specifically the Poe AI chatbot. And I'm assuming that everybody is able to see my screen. Carolina, can you be my eyes on that one, or everybody?
Yeah, I mean, we can see your screen, but you're not in presentation mode.
Yes, I'm about to put it in presentation mode, so I just wanted to make sure that everybody could see it first. There we go. All right, so I'm going to be talking about the large language learning model, and just so everybody knows in advance, this is a complicated topic for which I do not in any way, shape, or form claim to be an expert. But one of the reasons that I want to talk about it is I think that an important insight that I've certainly gained from working with people who are more knowledgeable about how AI functions is that it's not up to us, as in my I'm giving you my opinion, of course, but it's not up to us as, LBS instructors, coordinators, to be experts, as it were, on AI and its functions. It's really a matter of evolving our understanding. And so I look at it as, how is my understanding of the way AI learns developing? So I'm going to give you a very brief and I hope concise introduction to this, with the goal of, if you don't already have a working concept of what a large language learning model is, just something that you can walk away with and do a bit more exploration on your own. All right, so the way that a large language learning model works is that it begins with training data. And so a LLM, as they're called, is trained on different kinds of data sets. So in the case of LBS, and we have an LBS chatbot for this, one of the things that Carolina did was she introduced a series of documents like the OALCF, the Ontario Adult Learning Curriculum Framework, the CAST guidelines for accessibility, for example. Those were introduced to our chatbot, and then the chatbot assimilated that information. It collected that data with the goal of exposing this model to as many different, we'll call them language patterns, as possible. And those language patterns specifically are things that we use on a regular basis within the literacy and basic skills, curriculum development, teaching, and coordination, with the idea that when we return to the bot, it has been trained in this language and then is able to use these documents, these sources, to act in a predictive manner, to, in other words, answer the questions that we pose to the chatbot. And it does this using a mathematical model, which I'm not going to get into because, full disclosure, there's so much of it I just don't understand. But what I do know is that what is fascinating about AI is the way in which it converts these texts into mathematical modeling. So it can provide as accurate a prediction as possible when we pose questions to it. So for our purposes, one of the things the large language model does is that it works to understand grammar, vocabulary, context, and even, in the case of some of the sources we use, cultural nuances. So the written responses that it gives us are culturally appropriate, and that it is able to really interpret our questions accurately. So it's not giving us information that is irrelevant to what we are requesting. And again, it works within the documents and sources that we have provided to it. And it does this in a really fascinating way. The really meta level, the macroscopic way you can look at this, is that AI has been designed to work like the human brain in many respects. And so there are literally what they call neural networks that exist within AI. And those neural networks are linked by a series of interconnected nodes or neurons, which may sound familiar if you've ever even just done a little bit of reading about the human mind. And the goal is to simulate how a biological brain works. So again, for our purposes, large language models use a specific neural network architecture. They call them transformers, which are effective for processing data in a sequential manner, like reading a text. So if you can imagine giving the bot a copy of the OALCF, it is going through the OALCF in a sequential manner with the goal of being able to absorb that information and then also, again, be able to transmit responses to your questions in an orderly sequential manner that mimics human writing and human speech. And so these transformers or neurons excel at understanding relationships between words in a sentence or a document, which for our purposes makes them ideal for language-related tasks, right? So they are studying human language. Whoops. So the way that they do this is they use a system called tokens or embeddings, and this is an illustration for you of what tokens look like. Imagine each word or parts of a word as tokens. So the text is broken down into these smaller token units. And so you could take a word like understanding, and that word could be split into under, stand, and ing, depending on, the way the model has been designed. And this is where it gets fascinating and also beyond my current level of understanding. The tokens are then converted into what they call numerical vectors, what they call an embedding, and these embeddings help the model represent the meaning and relationships between the tokens in a way that the AI can process mathematically. So in other words, where we look at a sentence and we think about the relationship between verbs and adjectives and nouns and prepositions and so forth, we're thinking about it in a verbal language context. The AI is actually looking at it from a mathematical sequence. And that is actually how it is responding to our inquiries. And I would love at some point for somebody to provide me with a greater degree of demonstration of that, because I find just that concept alone to be fascinating. And so where this leads us is something called the attention mechanism. And to simplify the attention mechanism, because again, I realize the illustration you have in front of you is quite complex. The purpose of an attention mechanism is that it allows the AI model to weigh the importance of different tokens in a sentence in a much more meaningful manner. In other words, it helps the AI pay attention to, let's say, specific pronouns that allow the AI to truly grasp the nature of the question that you are asking it. And this is a major innovation within the field of AI. And I'm going to give you an example of this. So if I have a sentence like, she gave him a gift because he helped her, that attention mechanism means that the model is able to understand what the pronoun he refers to, right? That it is able to look at how the focus here is not on how she helped him, but the model knows that he is the focus. And if you've ever taught grammar, or if you've ever studied another language, this is where, especially when you're working with pronouns, things can become very complicated very quickly because you're trying to understand the relationship between the subject and the object. Well, this is what attention mechanisms are for. So this gives you a little bit of an insight into where AI is going and how it is able to provide better responses, again, to our questions and our inquiries. And so what I've done, and everyone is welcome to request a copy of these slides, is I've provided my sources for each of these slides. And so having just given you that brief introduction to the large language model, I want to also connect that to the concept of AI and instructor bandwidth. In other words, how can we use AI to free up our creativity? How can we use AI to make our jobs less onerous in some cases when we're working on several things at once? Can we help AI sort of not only speed up that process, but also free us to do some higher level thinking of our own? And this is something that I think connects very nicely to the large language model. So again, I've given you this basic introduction to what, how that model operates. But one of the things that we can do as instructors, as practitioners, is play with this, is play around with AI and ask it questions about how it can help us in terms of the work that we do, where we can bounce creative ideas off of it. But again, and this is a little bit outside the presentation, one of the things that we talked about over the course of the year with AI Bytes is the importance of knowing how to write effective prompts. In other words, posing questions, posing scenarios to the chatbot that enable it to really hone in on the nature of the question that we are asking, to really to enable the AI to really understand what type of a product or what type of a suggestion we are asking for. And so really what this comes down to is that your expertise as an LBS practitioner remains first and foremost in importance. It's paramount, because what you are going to get from the AI is completely dependent on the quality of what you put into it. And so again, the goal with this is that imagine yourself in a situation where you're trying something new and you have the advantage of a fellow instructor or a supervisor or someone on hand that you can bounce ideas or questions off of, and they can help you kind of narrow down what it is you're asking, or they can help brainstorm with you and about how that can help you get to your goal or destination much more quickly. We obviously don't always have that luxury. In fact, we often don't, because our colleagues are very busy. The goal with AI is to turn AI into an assistant, if you like. And that really depends on, again, our ability to come up with and develop effective prompts, which is something that I will be able to demonstrate momentarily when I show you, give you a more of a crash course in our AI chatbot that we have developed. So in this slide deck, final illustration, this is one that I actually used AI to develop a long time ago. I like the idea of putting the work that we do into a broader context. So I happen to be somebody who loves nature, the outdoors, and birds. So I thought, wouldn't it be nice to just have a picture of a text in the midst of a lush jungle with lots of birds, showing as much interest in the text as I would. So that is the first set of slides that I have. And I have another smaller set that I'm going to use to talk a bit about AI and accessibility in education, but also to give you a demonstration as well of how our chatbot operates. All right, so if you will just bear with me a minute here. My mouse on this computer has a habit of disappearing on me at times, so forgive me, this may just take a second.
And I wanted to share something about the
Please do.
last slide. Jeremy is a published author. Honestly, I have done so many images. Nobody does images like Jeremy, and I think it's because he speaks poetically to the AI. It's incredible what you can get.
Thank you, Carolina. Carolina is often one of my best cheerleaders for the work that I do, so thank you for that. So I want to talk a little bit about AI and accessibility. This is connected with the slides that I just offered you, and I will use this as a bridge to our bot momentarily. So one of the things that Carolina and I have worked on very extensively over the last few years, some of you at this webinar may have actually had an opportunity to work with us on this. We had a working group a couple of years ago exploring the relationship between accessibility and LBS teaching. And so one of the things I want to share with you are the CAST guidelines, which are guidelines for accessibility in teaching. Many of you have, or some of you have probably seen these. And one of the things that we used these guidelines are part of our LBS chatbot. They were fed in as part of the large language model that our chatbot uses. But one of the questions that invariably came up when we began our work on accessibility is that how do you use these guidelines? How do you use this chart? Because if you take a look at it, I mean, certainly my immediate response to it was it's very, there's a lot of information, it's very text heavy, but also where do we start? Is there a proper order for me to use this chart when I'm working with learners or I'm developing curriculum? And the answer to that is no. One of the things we discussed was that really, especially if you're working in a very learner-focused environment, you actually start where the learner is. You begin with them, and then you can build your curriculum development, you can build your teaching strategies around that. And that is true in a one-on-one basis. That can be true as well if you're working with a small group, because when you invite feedback and even if you provide surveys to people about what areas they feel strongest in, what areas they feel less conceptually sound, you can take the information that you provide and then you can also incorporate that into how you go about using the CAST guidelines. So I won't go into these in great detail, but what I will say is that I find that these are particularly relevant with LBS and AI, because if my primary goal starting out is to increase or encourage the engagement of learners, I can really begin at what I consider to be the very beginning in that upper left corner with recruiting interest. How do I go about recruiting interest? And as you can see there, optimize individual choice and autonomy, optimize relevance, value, and authenticity. And then, of course, also minimize threats and distractions. And again, this is going to be environment dependent. It's going to be learner dependent. But one of the things you're going to see is that I can develop questions for the LBS chatbot that make direct reference, for example, to recruiting interest. So what I will do, I'm just going to show you the link to our LBS chatbot, which I can also try to get into our chat. This is where you go to use it. I know many people have already had an opportunity to interact with it, but I like to think about how our LBS chatbot allows us to use the CAST guidelines I was just showing you as a lens for curriculum development, as a lens for teaching, as a way of being able to think differently and communicate with learners in a different way. All right, so I'm going to unshare my screen for a second here, and then I'm going to bring up our chatbot as well, so you get a demonstration of it. Just want to make sure that it is easily accessible. Sorry, bear with me a moment. I have it open, but I wasn't seeing it. Ah, there we go. Excellent. Okay, this is our chatbot. And for those of you who have experimented with this before, honestly, the best and most effective way to use this is to just use it and to experiment and to see what kinds of results that you get. So one of the things that I think would be a good way to begin here is, if you've used chatbots before, you're already, I'm sure, very familiar with the interface, but there's an option here to, of course, a box to message the chatbot. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about learner engagement, and I can think of a question, and I have several in mind on the spot, where I can say, I'm going to keep this pretty basic. I have an unengaged learner who needs to focus on improving their use of fractions. How do I use the CAST guidelines to motivate and engage this adult learner? And I want to make sure that I'm emphasizing adult. And you'll notice immediately that the reference points that are in here, for example, like provide multiple means of engagement, are directly taken from the CAST guidelines. So as you can see right away, it offers me a structured approach based on those guidelines. I'm going to try to, it's not always easy to scroll through this on a webinar, but as you can see here, there are multiple reference points, multiple means of representation, communication, multiple means of action and expression. So what I like about this, and I think this is a crucial part not only of the CAST guidelines, but also one of the things I appreciate about the chatbot and bots more generally, is that using math as an example, and I have some experience working on math with learners, so this is fresh in my mind. Oftentimes when a learner approaches math, they're thinking about how they don't like fractions, for instance, but they're not thinking about their broader relationship with fractions. They're only thinking about the fact that they just don't enjoy them. And when you come at the question of how to teach fractions from a variety of different perspectives, and that you're trying to make those perspectives, integrate those perspectives, I should say, with the learner, their interests, their background, the chatbot provides you with guidelines, or provides you with a structure in which to do that. It provides a way of structuring your conversations with that learner. And so I find, just from experience, that even you can use sort of the common sense background of, well, you don't like fractions, but do you bake? Do you measure? Do you build? Do you tinker? Do you find that you use measurements in your life? Okay, you do. In what way do you do them? And using that as a way of course, providing a learner-driven, learner-centric approach. And so while there are some basics there, I find that being able to then refer that back to the CAST guidelines can be really interesting, because what you can do is you can peruse these and then drill down a bit further on specifics. So for example, I'll focus for a moment on foster a supportive learning environment, which is something that I know that everybody here is already invested in. But specific to that is encourage a growth mindset, praise efforts and creativity in problem solving. Okay, well, I'm going to take that, going to highlight that, and I'm going to build that into a subsequent question. So I'm just going to paste what it said. All right. So what I would add to that is, can you explain to me, or actually, instead of explain, I'm going to say, can you suggest to me how I might use praise and creativity in helping a learner approach fractions in a new way. I know that this learner enjoys carpentry. So you can see what I did there. I brought in some personal details, but I also built off of what the bot had already told me. As you can see right away, what does it go to? It goes to contextualize learning with carpentry. And start by discussing how fractions are essential in carpentry. Now, you could do that, or you could maybe not do that if they really don't want to hear about the essential use of fractions, because of course they already know that. But you could talk about, or even ask them about, all right, can you tell me about a project in carpentry you were working on recently where measurement was a challenge, or maybe the building materials you had were, you had a cut of wood that wasn't quite as precise as you needed it to be. What did you do? How did you troubleshoot that? What kind of solution did you come up with? And of course here, sorry, my mouse is a little sensitive. As you can see here, there are ways of getting into that. So I can, where is it? Sorry, there's a dog in the office that you may hear barking in the background. So we can come up with challenges that allow the person to use examples that they have encountered in their carpentry work, and we can build a learning activity based on that. And, as you can see, again, I can continue to drill down here and pick out or pluck specific aspects of the answers that I've been given here. Like, for example, here about, collaborative learning. Is there a way to bring in peers? Is there a way to, take an activity that might be specific to an individual, but broaden that to a group? And I can continue to build on this in the message box here. Then I can do this up to 30 times before I have to begin a new line of inquiry, very similar to if you've used, Microsoft Copilot or ChatGPT, for example. And then if I want to start again, and if I'm going to go on a new line of inquiry, you can see there's a little broom here. I hover over that, it says clear context. I can click on that and we've restarted. We've reset. So I think that this gives you a pretty good idea of how this operates. I also am assuming that many of you have had the opportunity to experiment, if not with this specific bot, with bots more broadly. But I think that one of the things that is a real, from my standpoint, real selling point about the LBS chatbot specifically is that it has been designed to incorporate specific relevant documents and resources into its large language learning model, so that when you go to it with questions about the OALCF, for example, and if people have OALCF questions they would like me to ask this, I would be happy to do that. But that there are ways in which you can get right to a very task-specific to LBS issue, and the bot is there to help you. So at the moment, because I'm sharing my screen, I don't have easy access to the chat. Carolina, I did see that there were some items in the chat that popped up while I was presenting. Is there anything that I can address?
Not at the moment, Jeremy, that I see.
Okay.
We can wait. We can give people a minute if they have any questions regarding the OALCF, because it's certainly, you can build on a task based on even the prompts that you created related to carpentry. Yes. By just simply asking it, can you align, I like the idea, can you align the above notes to the OALCF? And it will create a task-based activity and with the competency and everything else. So all you need to do is ask, and that's the difference between this and a regular chatbot, is that it's specifically accessibility and LBS focus. And you can also ask it in French. It works pretty well in Spanish as well, and it will create relevant tasks.
Yeah, so as you can see, I literally responded to what Carolina was saying. Can you align the above notes to the OALCF to develop a task-based activity? And here you are. And again, I think too that this is once more where your expertise and experience are so valid and relevant, because again, the bot is going to give you or attempt to give you what you ask of it. And so when I have talked to people who have had initially some misgivings about using AI in this manner, what I have said is that really in many respects, it is a reference guide. I like to think, especially when it comes to the OALCF, that it's a really convenient way of pulling out more quickly relevant portions of the OALCF that are specifically relevant to the task at hand. So I like thinking about it as being a really convenient reference in that regard. And as Carolina indicated, it works very well in French and works pretty well in Spanish too.
Yes, I wanted to ask a point, since we see on the screen, this says Speak 11 Labs. So it's another model that was added, but unfortunately it's very expensive. So we're trying to use pretty much all the free credits, but if somebody decides to spend, on an account on Poe and you want those credits, you can certainly speak to it. So you will have those conversations that you normally have with Microsoft Copilot or ChatGPT in a natural language processing. So I pretty much, after asking it a couple of questions, I ran out of credits personally. So, but it does a pretty good job. It just reads aloud pretty much what you're seeing on the screen. So, which makes it more accessible. Just the pricing is not accessible. That's all. But we can still use it, right, in the written format. We can still use the microphones for dictation and cut and paste. And it won't just take you either to random websites, which is one of the nicest things for your protection, because it's specifically focused to follow the directions that were built on.
And one other item I'll mention, and again, I think many people are probably familiar with this, is that the more that you use the chatbot, the better informed it becomes, because it is also learning by responding to your questions and inquiries. That the learning is not something that ends when we cease to give it large texts, for example. Every time you are interacting with the bot, it is learning further. And so one of the things that I've learned about that is that when you are changing your line of questioning, it's always good to refresh and start a new line of inquiry. It's a way of, keeping some of the sorting of topics and information more discrete and more separate. So that is definitely something that I recommend, because the other thing too is that each user is going to have a more personalized experience. And Carolina was alluding to this when she talked about my creation of graphics, right? Is that the more you use a bot and the more it responds to your particular style of composition and writing, it's going to tailor its responses based on that. It is learning from you. So that is also something when you're working with this to keep in mind. And you may already be doing that with other bots that you are using. All right, well, in the interest of time, we have one more presentation, and that's Carolina's work on AI-powered tools at your fingertips. So AI and devices that you may already own. I feel like I kind of set up a little bit of a segue for that with my last remarks. So I will unshare my screen, and Carolina, again, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Just want to make sure you can see the AI powered tools at your fingertips slides.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, so we don't have much time. So there will be a little bit, if you're interested, there will be some reading and we will share these slides. So I prepared this resource with real focus on the AI-powered tools that instructors might have readily available or maybe familiar with. Sometimes we have these tools and we have no idea they're there, except for wearable technology. For example, I recognize that Ray-Ban smart glasses may not be something you personally own, but I included it to accommodate learners who might have one, right? So, all right, so transformative AI tools in action. So transcription tools on platforms like Windows 11, Google Docs, and iOS, there's real-time transcription, making communication very seamless. Whether it's live captions during a lecture or voice typing for quick note-taking, these tools bring the gap for those with who need it, like English as a second language learners, those who are from the deaf community. So the transcriptions are helpful for all. I personally use them too for my notes. Then we have voice commands. Voice commands, I'm thinking about AI assistants like Cortana, Google Assistant, talk about Siri or Alexa. They all enable hands-free interactions, from setting reminders to navigating smart home devices. Voice commands create ease and efficiency. I have ensured that I outline here some ways that you can find some of these settings, but as well examples of how you can interact with AI on Google Assistant, on Apple devices, and Amazon. One of the cool things that some instructors are not aware is that when you purchase the Echo device on the Amazon, sometimes it comes like $35. Learners can access Zoom meetings with them. So you can say, Alexa, start my Zoom meeting, and it will just start, or play music, or play audiobooks. You can also use Alexa for learners to practice a quiz in a fun way. And then they can say, Alexa, open my biology test prep, and so on. So then you have instant translation and read aloud. Tools like Microsoft Translator, Google Translate, Apple Translate open the door to global communication. They provide these real-time translations and read aloud features, making information accessible across languages and formats. So I put some examples of where you can find that as well, especially with Microsoft. If you're using the Microsoft Edge browser, you can find instant translation and read aloud options just in that browser, along with Microsoft Copilot. Now we talk about blind technology, optical character recognition. We're talking about all these recognitions technology, from object and facial recognitions, tools like Seeing AI and Google Lookout. There's also tools in development, such as sign language recognition apps, like Sign All. They're still in development. They're still not quite there, but I expect that in the next couple of years, we'll see some very cool developments. AI empowers individuals who are blind, low vision, and deafblind to navigate their environments with confidence and independence. And I have heard from people who are deafblind describing AI, especially Copilot, a miracle. I added a bit here of sign language recognition because I recognize, especially with the value of interpreters, that we need to think about, some of the benefits and some of the concerns and limitations of AI, including proper contextual interpretation and nuanced expressions. And I create a whole list here for some calls of actions and things to think about. Especially, one of the most important things is the human interpreters provide sensitivity and adaptability that AI cannot replicate. Then we have predictive text, error correction, multilingual typing. It's all in one keyboard. We can think about all those keyboard integrations with AI or technologies like Grammarly. They are all at your fingertips there. And I created and some links for you so that you can explore where those settings are. Then we have enhanced accessibility for screen reader users with AI-generated image descriptions. These innovations are available across platforms, and they improve navigation and content comprehension for many users. So there are ways on your settings to activate so that it can generate image descriptions. Now, it still requires human oversight because, as we know, alt text is very important, and they have tried for accessibility, but these generations are not necessarily as the word I'm looking for. Oh my gosh, I just lost my word. They're not factual, right? So we need to ensure that they are correct. And then we're thinking about wayfinding tools. Be My AI, haptic navigation, AI with eyes offering context, detailed descriptions, feedback on products. So I'm going to give you an example to show you that AI has eyes. Can you hear that? I may need to share my sound.
No, Carolina, we can't hear it, unfortunately.
Yeah, there is no way for me. Let's see, share sound. Got it. Okay, the captions are on. Offline international. Everybody can hear that?
If you could turn it up just a little bit, Carolina, but yes, we can hear it.
Yeah. Technology Network is eager to introduce you to Google AI Studio. Let's begin exploring its potential together, but before that, I would like to share with you what is it. This platform enables us to use Google technology to build and improve applications, which works with data like text, images, audio, and video. And I personally started using it in January 2025. What I will do is share my screen to show you how to access it. All you need is a Gmail account and search for Google AI Studio to log in. And then you will select Stream Real Time and either show Gemini or share my screen, depending on what you want to do. We'll start with sharing my computer screen with Google to obtain instructions and information. I will select Stream Real Time, and I will share my screen. It will prompt you and ask you what type of screen to share, because I have a few open. Are you there?
Yes, I am here. How can I help you?
I need your support interpreting the spreadsheet that is on my screen.
Okay, I see a spreadsheet on your screen. It appears to show sales data for different products across 4 months, January, April, July, and October of 2018. Is there anything specific you'd like help with in interpreting this spreadsheet?
Yes. Can you tell me how much in sales was for hot pepper sauce in July?
Certainly. According to the spreadsheet, the sales for hot pepper sauce in July were $1,375.62. Is there anything else you'd like to know about the spreadsheet?
Yes. What about crab meat in April 2018?
In April 2018, the sales for crab meat were $1,978, according to the spreadsheet. Is there anything else you would like to know?
What is the grand total?
The grand total of all sales for all products across all months in the spreadsheet is $19,239.04. Is there any other information you would like to get from the spreadsheet?
Yes. Which month was the lowest sales for veggie spread?
For veggie spread, the lowest sales were in April with $263.40. Is there anything else I can help you with regarding the spreadsheet?
So there is more. It actually can read food labels, it can read clothing tags, and it can provide you information related to, how to wash a certain sweater and so on. I will share a link to the video. Again, it is in part of the slides. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolina. All right. So before we wrap up the webinar, is there anyone who would like to ask some additional questions, either about Carolina's presentation or any of the other content that we have shared so far? If you have questions, feel free to put those into the chat. One of the things I will do, I think many of you already have my email, and it has been in the AI Bytes, but I'm going to put my email address into the chat so that, for example, if you have questions that come up, whether it's in the next few hours or few days or beyond, please feel free to reach out. Okay. I see thank you. There's some very nice comments in the chat. Thank you very much. I mean, I can certainly speak for myself. It's always a pleasure to be able to deliver content like this to fellow professionals and practitioners. And the webinar will definitely be made available as via Contact North. We'll also try to make that available too through Literacy Link South Central. So again, your feedback is certainly appreciated. And as Sarah mentioned at the beginning as well, when you log off, there will be an opportunity to fill out a very short survey. If you wouldn't mind doing that, this is part of our annual business planning. So this is the kind of feedback that the government is always looking for in response to our initiatives. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to do that, that would be terrific. But thank you all very, very much for taking time, especially at a remarkably busy time of year. We're in the final week of March, if you can believe it. And of course, it's the end of fiscal. So it is not lost on me, certainly, that everybody has set aside very busy schedules to be here. So truly, thank you very much for this. And I hope that you continue to enjoy the AI Bytes newsletters. The final one for this fiscal year should be due out in the next few days. And as you can see too in the chat, Carolina has taken notes about training the chat bot, and also we will try to make available to you the resume with corrections added to it as well. So these various resources will be made available to attendees. Okay. There's a question in the chat for Mike. How long do you think until we're in the Matrix? I don't know. I mean, if I go off based off the Matrix, aren't we already in the Matrix? But no, it's a good question. I mean, if we're talking about questions about AI singularity, those kind of come up on a regular basis. And I have one rule, which is that I make no predictions. But it's a good question that's by turns both funny and frightening.
Yes, it continues changing too. I can speak from experience that, and Sarah is here too, that sometimes when we submitted the draft, even for the AI Bytes, it was like, oh, something changed. So maybe get the draft back. It just continues changing too. So it's like at this point, with the advancements of this technology, ever since I have seen it, even from 3 years ago until now, it's just like, wow, it's incredible how much it changes and how hard to keep up is, really. And I read a lot about AI, and I still feel behind.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why when I was talking about large language models, I prefaced it by saying that my understanding is constantly evolving, and I don't present myself certainly as an expert on those things, but where I try to develop some expertise is ways in which we can use this technology and integrate it into our existing practice, but also, as Carolina showed, how we're already using it and how we can make some bridges in our own minds between ways in which we already are relying on some of this technology and how we can think about it in constructive and creative ways in our, in our work. All right. Well, again, thank you, everyone, for your attendance and for your participation and for your terrific questions and comments. And I can certainly say that it's been a pleasure to be able to share this information with you. And I look forward to be able to continue doing work in this field in the upcoming fiscal year as well. Okay. All right. Take care, everyone.